Have you ever considered the most powerful decision you can make? It is not a declaration, but a quiet departure. No grand exit, no final words, simply you, choosing stillness over chaos. This is not an easy path. In fact, it may be the most difficult thing you ever do, to detach from the people, habits, and thoughts that once felt like home, but now feel like a cage. You do not announce it. You do not explain it. You simply stop appearing in places where your soul no longer feels safe. And yet, this quiet exit is louder than any argument. It is the moment your energy stops pleading to be understood and instead chooses to be protected. The Stoics understood this well. Why do we feed our thoughts with noise, drama, and emotional clutter? Why do we linger in spaces that drain us? Simply because we fear leaving without a word. Let me be honest with you. True strength is not found in confrontation, but in control. It is in learning to let go of what weakens you without ever asking for permission. This is a meditation on the 15 things you must silently remove from your life, not with anger, not with chaos, but with clarity. If this idea of a quiet revolution resonates within you, if you are tired of being who the world expects and are ready to grow into the person you were meant to become, then perhaps this is your first step. Let us grow together, silently, but with immense power. First, let go of the mask you wear for approval. You do not have to pretend anymore. You truly don't. That quiet performance you stage just to be accepted, the polite nod when you disagree, the weary smile when you are hurting, the silence you keep when you long to speak. It is a profound exhaustion, a slow erosion of the soul. There comes a point when wearing the mask is heavier than facing any reaction your true self might provoke. Perhaps it began in school, or with family, or in a relationship you barely remember. Slowly, piece by piece, you constructed a version of yourself designed to be safe, to be liked, to be acceptable. Now that version is so well rehearsed, even you sometimes forget it is not real. But being liked for a mask is a hollow victory. They are not applauding you, but the character you've painstakingly created. This is why it never feels fulfilling. Even when you get the approval, even when you are surrounded by people, a feeling of loneliness persists because no one truly knows you. And how could they? You have kept yourself hidden beneath layers of what you thought they wanted to see. You adjust your tone, your style, your pace, trying to match expectations, hoping that if you keep everyone happy, they will stay. But what if the price of that approval is your own peace? It is not selfish to be yourself. It is not wrong to have opinions, to walk away, to say no, or to outgrow people who only knew an older version of you. If being authentic makes someone uncomfortable, that discomfort is theirs to carry, not yours. You were not born to perform. You were born to live, to grow, to breathe fully in your own skin, without apology. Yes, letting go of the mask will mean losing some people, but you are not truly losing them. You are losing the illusion that they were ever meant for you. Anyone who only wants the version of you that pleases them was never interested in your soul. You can feel it when it's time to be real. Your body begins to reject the act. You feel drained after every interaction that demands a false smile. You feel hollow after agreeing to something that felt wrong. That is your inner compass, screaming for freedom. The Stoics believed in the alignment of thought, word, and action. When you say what you mean, when you act from a place of truth, your soul can finally breathe. As Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Sometimes the path to your truest self begins with being misunderstood. Perhaps that is the price of honesty, to be misread. But it is worth it. What is the alternative? Living a life that isn't yours, chasing approval that never satisfies, pretending forever. You were not placed here to be a watered-down version of yourself for someone else's comfort. You were placed here to walk your own path, even if it is unfamiliar to others. And the strange thing is, when you begin to live as your true self, you not only feel free, you begin to attract people who see you, support you, and love you for exactly who you are. A strange kind of peace arrives then, the peace that comes from no longer trying to manage everyone's perception of you. You stop replaying conversations in your mind. You stop wondering what they think. You stop editing yourself. And in that quiet space, something powerful begins to grow. Self-respect. Not arrogance, not defiance, just a calm confidence that says, "This is who I am, and I am okay with that." You do not need to explain it. You do not need to justify it. You only need to live it. Letting go of the mask doesn't mean becoming harsh or cold. It means becoming whole. It means allowing the parts of you that have been buried, your voice, your ideas, your true laughter, your boundaries, to rise once more. At first, it will feel foreign, awkward, even laced with guilt. This is normal. You have been trained for years to believe that pleasing others is the same as being kind. But the kindest thing you can do is to show up truthfully, because that gives others permission to do the same. You will be surprised at how much lighter life feels when you stop filtering yourself. Conversations become easier, relationships become clearer, and your decisions stop being about what will they think and start being about what feels right for me. That shift is everything. It is not about becoming rebellious. It is about becoming real. No more nodding when you want to shake your head. No more laughing when something isn't funny. No more saying yes when your body is screaming no. You do not owe anyone the version of you that made them comfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Truth is uncomfortable. But silence and pretending are worse. They chip away at you until you no longer recognize your own voice. So take the risk. Be misunderstood. Be too much. Be quiet. Be bold. Be unsure. Be evolving. But above all, be you. Let them call it strange. Let them call it selfish. Let them walk away if they must. But you walk home to yourself. That is where your peace lives. That is where your power begins. The day you drop the mask is the day you truly start to live. Then, you must release the excuse called tomorrow. Consider the quietest thief of all, the promise of tomorrow. It has likely stolen more from your life than any failure or rejection ever could. Not a dramatic loss, but a quiet, harmless-looking delay. It is so subtle, you barely notice how often you trade today for a future that never arrives. You convince yourself that you are waiting for the right moment, for things to align, for a little more clarity or time or energy. But days turn into weeks and weeks into years, and the dreams you swore you would chase become buried under calendars filled with excuses. The danger of tomorrow lies in its reasonableness. It isn't a monster that terrifies. It is a whisper that soothes. Not now. And you believe it, time and again. What we often forget is that action does not require perfection. You do not need all the answers, all the resources, or even all the courage. You just need to begin. There is a strange freedom that comes when you stop waiting and start moving. Not rushing, just moving. One step, one small, imperfect action. That first move unlocks something within you. Momentum, clarity, confidence. All the things you thought must come before. You act often only appear after. Waiting will not bring certainty, but doing, that is where everything changes. Do you know what is worse than failure? regret. Because with failure, you learn, you grow, you build something real. But regret simply eats away at you. You look back and realize that the one thing you were too scared to start could have been the thing that saved you, freed you, fulfilled you. You can never rewind the time you spent hesitating. The truth is, most of the things you delay are not delayed by logic, but by fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being seen trying. Fear of starting small. But every master was once a beginner. Every great thing began clumsily. What makes it great is that it began at all. We live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, but ironically, most people are only hustling in their minds. They plan, they imagine, they dream, but they rarely execute. An idea can live in your head for so long that it starts to feel real, even though it never left the ground. But nothing changes until something moves. That text you're afraid to send, that project you keep overthinking, that change you keep putting off, all of it is costing you energy just by existing in your mind. You carry the weight of what you are avoiding, and the longer you avoid it, the heavier it becomes. There will never be a day when everything is perfectly aligned. The fear will still be there. The doubts will still whisper. The obstacles will not vanish. But neither will your desire. And if it keeps coming back to you, that is not a coincidence. That is your deeper self trying to break through the fog of your excuses. You do not need a loud breakthrough. Sometimes the most powerful shift comes from a quiet decision, the decision to start. Even if it is small, even if it is awkward, even if no one notices but you. Seneca once said, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." That line truly lands when you look back and realize how many moments have slipped away, how many passions you buried under distractions, how many conversations you avoided because you feared what they might change. Time does not wait for clarity. It keeps moving, and you either move with it or you watch it pass you by. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do not underestimate the power of small actions. 5 push-ups today is better than fantasizing about a perfect workout routine next month. Writing 1 paragraph now is better than obsessing over the perfect novel outline forever. Action creates progress. Progress builds belief. And belief transforms everything. When you start doing the things you have been putting off, something strange happens. You stop being afraid of effort. You stop resenting discipline. You start respecting yourself. And that self-respect is priceless. It is not about crossing items off a list. It is about becoming the kind of person who follows through, who keeps promises to themselves, who no longer lets fear dress up as logic. Reflection without movement turns into rumination. Overthinking is just fear disguised as preparation. At some point, you must close the books that describe the life you want and begin writing its first, real chapter, one bold, messy, beautiful step at a time. You might trip, you might fall, but even then, you will be further ahead than the version of you who stayed frozen, waiting for perfect conditions that never came. Your life will not change in a single day, but its shift can begin today. Stop giving your power to a day that doesn't exist. Realize that someday is not on the calendar. Only today is. And you are enough to begin right now. Next, you must quiet the looping tape of the past. Is it not strange how the past can feel more vivid, more present than the moment you are in right now? A conversation that ended years ago still echoes in your mind. A mistake you made once still stings, as if it just happened. A look, a word, a single moment, all playing on a loop, over and over. Many of these memories are insignificant from a distance, but they carry an emotional weight that was never released. They linger not because they are powerful, but because they were never truly processed. They become a central part of your inner dialogue, always reminding you of what went wrong, of what hurt, of what broke. You might think that remembering is necessary, that it protects you from being hurt again. But there is a vast chasm between remembering and reliving. One teaches you, the other traps you. And far too many of us confuse self-awareness with self-punishment. You do not need to keep replaying the hardest chapters of your life just to stay grounded. You are not required to keep those wounds open as proof of your survival. What happened, happened. You survived it, and that is enough. You do not have to live inside the same story forever. A part of you, perhaps small and buried, already knows this. That part of you craves peace. It does not want to forget what happened, but it longs to stop being defined by it. And that is the key. You are not what happened to you. You are not your trauma, not your pain. You are the one who went through it, the one who endured, the one who kept going, even when it was messy, even when no one noticed. That is who you are. Not the victim of the story, but the one who is still here, still breathing, still capable of writing the next page. And yes, it is hard. Letting go can sometimes feel like a betrayal. You might think that if you release the pain, you are letting those who hurt you off the hook. Or perhaps you fear that if you move on, the hurt will simply return. But real forgiveness is not about them. It is about you. It is not about justifying what happened. It is about finally putting down the weight, because the more you carry, the less you can move forward. The more space the past takes up, the less room there is for the present to grow. As Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This is the essence of healing. You cannot change what happened. You cannot go back and make different choices. But you can decide what to do with the pain. Will it become a cage or a compass? Will it hold you in place, or will it point you towards something better? The most painful thing is rarely the event itself, but the way we carry it afterward. We replay the memory, analyze every detail, and wonder what we could have done differently. In doing so, we keep the wound fresh. The mind keeps touching it, poking at it, never allowing it to heal. Healing doesn't mean the past disappears. It means you stop letting it dominate your present. You stop waking up with your heart already heavy from yesterday. And here is a truth rarely spoken. We sometimes cling to our pain because it has become familiar. It weaves itself into the fabric of our identity. We grow accustomed to being the one who was hurt, who was abandoned, who made the mistake. Without realizing it, we build our self-image around this narrative. The idea of letting go, then, feels like losing a part of ourselves. But that version of you, the one who endured all of that, is tired. They have done enough. They do not need to keep reliving it for you to remember your strength. They deserve rest. You owe your past nothing. You have paid your dues. You have carried the lessons. Now it is time to carry only that, the lesson, not the burden, the wisdom, not the wound, the insight, not the pain. You are allowed to change your story. You are allowed to heal without seeking permission. You are allowed to be more than your worst moment. When you catch yourself drifting back, when thoughts pull you into old guilt, anger, or sadness, simply pause. Breathe. Acknowledge the feeling, and then gently remind yourself, that was then, this is now. It is not denial. It is a choice not to let something that has already happened hurt you again today. The mind can be a relentless narrator. It loves to replay the parts it didn't understand. But you are the one who is listening. The moment you stop identifying with every thought, you begin to take your power back. You can choose new thoughts, ones that bring calm instead of chaos, ones that support you instead of sabotaging you. There is no deadline for healing, But there is a cost for postponing it. Every day spent living in the shadow of what was is a day not fully lived in the potential of what could be. You deserve to wake up without that constant loop in your head. You deserve mornings that are not heavy with old grief. You deserve to smile without feeling guilty for it. You can honor your past without being chained to it. You can respect what shaped you without letting it define you. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It means choosing freedom. It means whispering to yourself, I am allowed to be okay now. And that is a quiet courage the world desperately needs. Finally, release the need for emotional begging. There is a unique silence that follows the act of emotional begging. It is not a silence you choose, but one you are left with after pouring yourself out, trying to be enough for someone who is never going to meet you halfway. You try harder, reach further, speak softer, love louder, and still, they pull away. You think, perhaps if I just do one more thing, give one more piece of myself, they will finally stay. But the truth is, real connection does not require chasing. Love that must be pleaded for is not love at all. It is merely approval wearing a convincing disguise, and approval is never worth the cost of your peace. Somewhere along the line, we were taught that love is something to be earned, that we must prove ourselves over and over just to be chosen. We absorbed the idea that being good enough meant pleasing others, even at the expense of our own emotional health. And so we learned to beg, not always with our words, but with our actions, with our silence, with our lowered standards, with our willingness to keep accepting less while giving more. We beg by shrinking ourselves to avoid conflict, by staying quiet when our heart wants to scream, by smiling when we are breaking inside, hoping they will finally notice our worth. But love is not a transaction. It is not a prize you win by sacrificing your self-respect. If someone makes you feel as though you have to constantly work for their attention, their affection, their time, they are not offering love. They are offering you a test, but you were not created for a life of constant examination. You were meant to be met completely, to be seen without reservation, to be held in respect. There is a love that does not demand you plead for it, a love that hears the language of your silence and listens, a love that notices the subtle shifts in your energy, not because you have made a scene, but from a place of genuine care. That love does not punish you with distance. It offers clarity, not confusion. It does not manipulate you into believing your value is measured by the pain you are willing to endure. But to find this love, you must first believe you are worthy of it. You must stop accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. It is a painful thing to walk away, especially when your heart remains tethered. But it is a deeper pain to stay in a place that demands you constantly prove you matter. A slow erosion of the soul occurs when you continually chase those who only notice you in your absence. The foundation of your confidence begins to fracture. Your self-image blurs, and you begin to mistake instability for passion, manipulation for intensity, and inconsistency for a complex form of love. This is how deeply the mind can be rewired when you live in a state of emotional scarcity. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because in complete self-acceptance, the need for external validation dissolves. The begging ceases. You no longer plead for a seat at tables where your presence is tolerated for its use, but not cherished for its worth." And yes, it is terrifying at first, for it means releasing relationships that once felt like home. It means facing the quiet emptiness you once filled with noise. It means standing in your own truth, even if your legs tremble. But what follows is a profound peace, an inner stillness that requires no outside approval. A love for yourself that does not hinge on the affection of another. You begin to move through the world differently. You no longer feel the need to convince people of your worth. The performance ends. You simply exist. And those who are meant for you will recognize the truth of who you are, without any show. Sometimes the most powerful act is to stop talking, stop fixing, stop chasing. Let your absence articulate what your presence endured. This is not a game, nor a punishment. It is a boundary, a final, sacred act of self-respect. You were never meant to feel that love is a battle for survival. You were never meant to confuse anxiety with intimacy. You are not a fraction, waiting for another to make you complete. You are not a collection of missing pieces. You are, and have always been, whole. The people who cannot meet you there are simply not your people. It does not make them evil. It only means they are incapable of giving you what you need. And your duty is not to teach them how to love you. Your only duty is to love yourself enough to walk away from those who cannot. This is not a closing of the heart, but a protection of it. You become more discerning, not more bitter. You learn to recognize the difference between someone who wants to love you and someone who wants to use you. You learn to sit with the discomfort of being alone rather than tolerate the pain of being unseen. And in that solitude, you begin to heal. Healing does not come from chasing closure. It comes from choosing yourself, from understanding that your worth was never a subject for debate, that your softness was never a weakness, that your loyalty in the midst of chaos was not foolishness. It was love, simply misdirected. Now, you have the chance to redirect it where it truly belongs, into your own heart, your own hands, your own life. A life where peace is your birthright, not a negotiation. When love is real, it arrives quietly, without pressure or performance. It does not sow doubt. It brings clarity. So let them go. Let the silence fall. Let peace wash over you like a gentle tide, cleansing every part of you that once fought for scraps. This is not surrender. It is an ascension. It is the act of remembering the person you were before the world convinced you that your worth had to be earned. This is the end of emotional begging and the beginning of your rising. But rising up also means confronting the battles within, starting with the imaginary catastrophes you author in your mind. You are not a prophet, yet you live as one, forecasting an endless chain of disaster, writing mental scripts for conversations that will never happen, and rehearsing a pain that may never arrive. Each time you do this, you are suffering twice, once in the theater of your mind, and again as the phantom of that fear poisons your present reality. There is a deep exhaustion in constantly bracing for impact, in moving through life with a perpetual flinch. You believe this worry keeps you safe, but worry does not prepare you. It paralyzes you. It robs you of the only time you truly have, now. The truth is, most of what you fear will never materialize. Fear is a master of disguise, often masquerading as logic. It tells you that you are being cautious, responsible, realistic. But you are merely running mental simulations of failure and calling it preparation. You rehearse heartbreak before love has a chance to bloom. You imagine judgment before you have even spoken a word. This is not safety. It is self-sabotage. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety." Or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. Your mind can be your sanctuary or your prison. Anxiety thrives on what if, but peace lives in what is. What is real in this moment? That is where your attention belongs. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between a threat that is real and one that is imagined. So every time you descend into worry, your body responds as if under attack. But you can change this. With gentle awareness, you can notice the fear rise, feel the spiral begin, and instead of following it down, you can choose to pause, to breathe, to ground yourself in the tangible world around you. Slowly, you begin to teach your body a new language, one where safety is found not in control, but in trust. Trust in your ability to respond to life as it unfolds. Trust in your resilience. Every hardship you have ever faced, you have survived. You are not fragile. You are simply weary. Weary of holding the weight of every possible future, of playing chess with imaginary problems. Let it go. Life does not require prediction. It requires participation. You only need to be present for the step in front of you. Take a breath. Drop your shoulders. All you need is the courage to show up for what is real. And so, when fear returns to knock upon your door, and it will, you will recognize it for what it is. Not prophecy, but merely noise. Let it pass. And just as you learn to let go of future fears, you must also learn to release the poisons of the past, the silent grudges that corrode you from within. Clinging to resentment can feel like a form of control, a belief that if you remain angry enough you can prevent history from repeating itself. But the grudge does not build a fortress, it builds a prison, and you are its sole occupant. It does not protect you, it poisons you, quietly, until you forget what it feels like to be light. Often, the deepest scars are not left by the loud betrayals, but by the quiet hurts never voiced, the apologies never received, the wounds left to fester in silence. You tell yourself you have moved on, but if the memory still carries a sting, the wound is not healed. It is merely buried. The nature of forgiveness is often misunderstood. It is not about excusing another's actions or letting them off the hook. Forgiveness is about you. It is the conscious refusal to grant your past the power to dictate your future. Resentment anchors you to the moment of your wounding, forcing you to relive the pain again and again, while the person who caused it may be living freely, having long since forgotten the fire they lit. True strength lies in the courage to unclench your fists, to turn away from the path of revenge, and to declare, "This hurt me, but it will no longer define me." Forgiveness need not be a conversation. Sometimes, the most powerful form of release is internal, quiet, and absolute. You will know you have let go when their name can be spoken without igniting a firestorm in your soul. You are permitted to set this burden down. Your healing does not require their permission. You do not always need to seek closure. Sometimes your decision to walk away is the closure. This is not an act of pardon for them. It is an act of liberation for you. This liberation creates the space to confront the final great illusion, the false finish line we call happiness. We have been sold a pervasive myth that happiness is a destination to be reached, that once you achieve the next milestone, you will finally arrive. But the unspoken truth is that this finish line is a mirage, perpetually receding as you draw near. You may build a life that is admirable on the surface, yet on the inside, a quiet waiting persists, a hope that the next achievement will finally bring you peace. But happiness was never the destination. It was always meant to be discovered in the way you walk the path. For if your inner landscape is a place of harsh criticism, no external achievement will ever silence the storm. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not to impress, not to accumulate, but to become. True happiness rarely arrives with a fanfare. It is subtle, a quiet visitor. It reveals itself in the fleeting beauty of small moments, the way sunlight warms your face, the stillness after a long day, the ease of a genuine conversation. But if your gaze is fixed on the horizon, you will miss the sacred ground beneath your feet. You believe you are chasing perfection, but what your soul truly craves is peace. And peace is not found in having all the answers, but in the gentle release of needing to. It is found in showing up as you are and choosing to be kind to yourself anyway. Joy is not something to be earned. It is something to be noticed. Stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, for the perfect circumstances, for the perfect version of you. The moment is now. The peace you seek is not in the future you are chasing, but in the presence you can inhabit today. It is found in the courageous act of accepting yourself completely, of letting go of what weighs you down, and of releasing the fear of what might be. It is discovered not by arriving at a finish line, but by realizing you were never in a race to begin with. The privilege of a lifetime is simply to be here, now, fully. And that is enough. Life does not wait for you to be ready. It is happening now. And if you are forever waiting for the right moment to be happy, you will simply run out of time, because there is no perfect day. There is only today. And what you do with it, how you speak to yourself, how you treat others, how you choose to see your own life, that is where happiness begins. It is not in the dream vacation, but in the quiet ritual of making your morning coffee. It is not in the roar of applause, but in the silent sense of pride you feel after keeping a promise to yourself. It is not in the grand victories, but in the daily ceremonies, the way you ground yourself, the way you pause, the way you take a single conscious breath before you react. These are not small things. They are the real things, and they add up slowly, quietly, until one day you look around and realize you are no longer chasing. You are living. There is nothing wrong with having goals. Growth is essential. Dreams matter. But they cannot come at the cost of your presence, nor at the expense of your peace. If the process of becoming is filled with self-loathing and anxiety, what kind of person will you be when you finally arrive? If you do not know how to feel content without the title, the partner, or the recognition, will you even know how to enjoy them when they come? This is the question we seldom ask, because we assume happiness itself will teach us how to live. But in truth, how you live determines how happy you can be. Your habits matter more than your highlights. Your inner dialogue matters more than your resume. How you treat people on an ordinary Tuesday says more about your life than any photo on your feed. The most powerful shift occurs when you stop asking, "When will I be happy?" and start asking, "How can I create joy today with what I already have?" That question changes everything, because it takes the power back. It puts you in charge, not your job, not your bank account, not your relationship status, you. So chase peace, not perfection. Chase moments of meaning. Chase conversations that fill your soul. Chase habits that make you proud. Let the version of you that is always rushing finally take a breath. Let the one who thinks happiness is somewhere out there sit down and rest. You are already allowed to be happy, not because everything is perfect, but because you are alive, because you are trying, because in this moment, you are here. And that is enough. There is no finish line, only a series of moments. And in each one, you get to decide how you will show up. Not for the world, not for some imaginary audience, but for yourself. So let happiness be something you build, not something you wait for. Let it be messy. Let it be quiet. Let it be now. There comes a point when you grow weary of explaining yourself, not because you are hiding anything, but because the truth of your life requires no audience for its validation. You begin to realize that not every choice needs a speech, not every decision demands a backstory, and not every person who asks is owed an answer. Your life is not a courtroom. You do not owe the world a constant justification for who you are, why you stayed, why you left, why you changed, or why you did not. This pressure to explain often springs from a profound need to be understood, a natural desire, for we crave connection, clarity, and closure. Yet, the more you explain, the more you begin to perform. You find yourself packaging your decisions for easier consumption, even if it means diluting your own truth, shrinking your real reasons into something more palatable, less offensive, more socially acceptable. But who are you doing that for? For them? Or for the part of you that still believes it needs permission to exist? Every time you over-explain, you hand over a piece of your power. You give others the impression that your choices are up for debate, that they are entitled to a vote in the democracy of your life. But your path is not a group project. It is a personal journey, shaped by all you have endured, all you value, and where you are headed, and most of that remains invisible to everyone else. Silence is often mistaken for avoidance or arrogance, but it is neither. Silence is sacred. It is a decision, a boundary, a calm confidence that feels no need to prove itself. When you know who you are, you do not explain. You embody. You live, you breathe, you show up as yourself without feeling the need to defend your own presence. And ironically, that is when people truly start to listen, because there is an undeniable power in a person who moves with quiet certainty. You do not have to explain your healing. You do not have to explain why you stopped speaking to certain people. You do not have to explain why your boundaries are firmer now or why your priorities have shifted. Growth can be quiet. It does not require a press release. You are allowed to change your mind, to evolve, and to refrain from updating everyone on your progress. Sometimes the most transformative moments of your life arrive not with an explanation, but with simple, decisive action. A strange freedom emerges when you stop seeking approval. You begin to make choices for alignment, not for applause. You start valuing your inner peace over your outward performance. And in that shift, life grows lighter. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. Your life is not a public relations campaign. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, stop explaining and start living. People will form their own narratives regardless of what you say. They will twist your words, project their own fears, and hear only what they want to hear. Trying to control that is a battle you will never win. You do not owe the version of you that exists in someone else's mind your energy. Let your choices speak for you. Let your peace be your answer. Let your consistency, your kindness, and your boundaries say what words never could. The people who genuinely love and respect you do not need long explanations. They trust your heart. They honor your boundaries. They support your decisions even when they may not fully understand them. That is how you know they are your people, not because they agree with everything, but because they do not demand you prove yourself. So stop explaining. Start being. Start living as someone who no longer seeks permission to exist. Let that be your quiet rebellion. Let your actions, your stillness, and your strength be the only explanation you ever need. We tend to believe our energy is lost in dramatic fashion, in burnout, exhaustion, or emotional crashes. But the truth is, energy is usually drained in silence by small, seemingly harmless habits that slip into our day and settle in like background noise. You barely notice them at first. The late-night scrolling that steals your sleep, the skipped breakfast that fogs your mind, the automatic yes to things your body and soul are screaming no to. These tiny moments, repeated daily, chip away at your vitality. They do not seem dangerous, but their cumulative effect is profound. Unchecked, they slowly dismantle your clarity, your confidence, and your capacity to show up fully in your own life. You wake up heavy, not just in body, but in spirit. You feel behind before the day has even begun. Your mind is cluttered, decisions feel harder, and your willpower is frayed. Yet the external pressures keep pushing. Deadlines, relationships, responsibilities. So you run on fumes, hoping no one notices how close you are to shutting down. This is where we fall into a trap. We believe a complete life overhaul is the only solution. A brand new routine, a bulletproof morning plan, a fitness transformation. But real change rarely begins that way. It begins with one decision, one habit, one small act of reclaiming your energy. For energy is not just about what you eat or how long you sleep. It is about what you tolerate, what you consume, and what you allow into your mental and emotional space. You say yes out of politeness, and suddenly your week is filled with obligations that leave you depleted. You open your phone for 5 minutes, and 40 minutes later, you are tangled in someone else's drama, comparing lives and absorbing noise. These are not small issues. They are signals. Ignoring them does not make you stronger. It only causes you to sink in silence. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is precisely what these habits do. They operate just beneath your awareness, shaping your mood and motivation, until you begin to believe that feeling drained is simply who you are. But it is not who you are. It is the sum of what you repeat. The most powerful shift happens when you stop accepting fatigue as your identity and start treating it as a signal for change. You do not need to change everything overnight. That is the illusion that keeps people stuck. Momentum comes not from motivation, but from action, from choosing to break one small pattern today. Drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. Stretch your body for 5 minutes. Say no to something you usually agree to out of guilt. These are not just healthy habits. They are declarations. They are proof that you are no longer willing to betray yourself for convenience or approval. It will not feel monumental at first. One glass of water will not change your life, but it sends a message to your mind and body. I am paying attention now. The more you follow through on these tiny promises, the more you begin to trust yourself again. That trust builds self-respect, and self-respect fuels the discipline that unlocks the energy you have been missing. Your strength is buried under habits you have normalized. You think your motivation is broken, but perhaps you are just tired from carrying things that do not belong to you. Your mind is not foggy because you are weak, but because it has been overstimulated and undernourished for too long. The change you crave is not as far as it seems. It just looks smaller than you expected. Cut one thing today that drains you. It could be a toxic conversation, a mindless scroll before bed, or an extra task you accepted out of habit, not joy. Remove it, not with drama, but with clarity. And in the space you create, insert one thing that restores you. A quiet moment, a short walk, a firm boundary, a deep breath. Let that be your reset. Energy is sacred. You do not get more of it by chasing it. You protect it by managing what you allow to steal it. And once you start seeing your habits through that lens, everything changes. You are no longer sleepwalking through your life. You are finally awake. There is a voice inside your head you have been listening to for so long, you no longer question its authority. It tells you that you are not doing enough, that you are falling behind, that everyone else has it figured out. It whispers harsh words when you are tired, when you make a mistake, when you fall short. And somehow, you believe it. You never stop to ask where that voice came from, or why it sounds so much like a bully dressed as a coach. You simply assume it must be right, because it is yours. But that voice is not the truth. It is a habit, and it is keeping you stuck. You are not lazy or broken. You are overwhelmed, pulled in 1,000 directions, trying to carry it all with quiet grace. The fact that you get out of bed, that you show up, that you keep going while your inner dialogue tears you apart, that is not weakness. That is monumental strength. But your mind has grown so accustomed to being hard on itself that it knows no other language. You have mistaken pressure for motivation, criticism for discipline, and self-punishment for growth. But you cannot shame a flower into blooming. You cannot yell at a wound to make it heal faster, and you will not become your best self by berating the person you are today. True progress does not come from force. It comes from understanding. It comes from asking better questions. Not, what is wrong with me? But, what is it that I need? Not, why can't I just do this? But, what is truly blocking my way? When you trade judgment for curiosity, everything softens. The path clears. You stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. This shift is powerful, because when you change the way you speak to yourself, you change the way you treat yourself. You make room for rest without guilt. You make room for mistakes without branding yourself a failure. You begin to recognize that growth is not linear, and it is certainly not perfect. There will be days you feel on fire, and days you feel you are unraveling. Both are part of the process. Both are allowed. And neither defines your worth. As Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. That includes the narrative you choose to repeat in your mind every single day. If your thoughts are perpetually anchored in self-blame and doubt, then no matter what you achieve, it will never feel like enough. You will reach your goals and still feel empty, still hear that voice whispering, yes, but you could have done it better. Perhaps the answer is not to do more, but to pause long enough to ask, where did I learn to speak to myself this way? And do I still need to? Because there is a version of you waiting on the other side of that harshness. A version that still has dreams, still wants joy, still believes peace is possible. But it needs you to be on its side first, especially when things are not going well. Anyone can offer themselves grace on a good day. But what about the messy days? The ones where nothing gets done, where you feel like giving up, where everything is heavy and loud and pointless. That is when you need the kindest version of yourself the most. Being compassionate does not mean you are giving up. It means you are creating the conditions for sustainable change. Discipline built on shame will always crack. But discipline built on care, on honesty, on kindness, that is unshakable. You begin to show up for yourself not because you fear falling behind, but because you believe you are worthy of being cared for. It starts small, catching that voice in the act. When it says, "You're so behind," respond with, "I am doing the best I can with what I have." When it says, "You always mess this up," counter with, "This is a pattern I can learn to shift." This is not about false positivity. It is about the truth. And the truth is, you are carrying a great deal. You have come a long way. You are still here, still trying. That deserves more credit than you are giving yourself. The world will always be quick to judge and demand. Do not become another critic in your own life. Be your own anchor, your own reset, your own gentle reminder that struggle is human. Rest is human. You are human. And humanity was never meant to be a performance. Never mistake your inner chaos as a disqualification from growth. It is, instead, the very soil from which it springs. In fact, it is the very thing that makes your growth real. So as you navigate the path of your habits, your goals, and your healing, remember this. The voice in your head matters more than you can possibly imagine. Let it be a voice that builds, not one that breaks. a voice that guides, not one that punishes. Let it sound more like a coach and less like a critic. And when in doubt, simply pause and ask yourself, what would truly help me right now? Not what would make you seem impressive, not what would earn the applause of others, just what would help. That question, asked with consistency, will carry you further than any harsh inner monologue ever could. Because compassion isn't a weakness, it is the fuel for everything you are becoming. 11. The need to always be right. There is a strange and subtle pressure that creeps in when we feel the need to always be right. It begins as a quiet tension in your chest when someone questions your opinion, a reflexive need to explain yourself when no one has asked, a feeling that if you let something go unchallenged, you have somehow lost. But the truth is, being right is not always the victory it appears to be. Because what it often costs you is far more valuable than proving a point. It costs your time, your calm, your presence, and sometimes even your relationships. In the heat of the moment, defending your position feels justified. You have logic, facts, and experience on your side, and it feels as if you don't speak up, the other person wins. But this is not a courtroom. Life is not a debate stage. Most of the time, there is no prize for being right, only tension. You walk away from the conversation mentally drained, your heart racing, replaying what you said, what they said, what you should have said. And for what? To protect a version of yourself that cannot be wrong? That is not protection. It is ego, dressed up as certainty. The need to be right doesn't always stem from arrogance. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear of not being heard. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that if you are wrong, you will be seen as less competent, less intelligent, less valuable. But being wrong does not make you less. It makes you human. Everyone misses the mark. Everyone misreads the situation. Everyone forgets details, reacts emotionally, or changes their mind. What matters more than being right is being rooted, grounded enough in your own worth that a disagreement no longer feels like a threat. The psychologist Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This is especially true when it comes to arguments. If every disagreement feels personal, if every challenge makes your chest tighten, it might be less about the other person and more about your inner world. The need to be right often hides deeper insecurities. Maybe you weren't listened to growing up. Maybe you were always the one to fix things. Maybe somewhere along the way you learned that being wrong meant being weak. But you are not that child anymore. You are not in that chapter anymore. You can be wrong now and still be safe. There is a quiet strength in saying, "You might be right," and truly meaning it, in stepping back from the tug of war and choosing peace over pride. It doesn't mean you have no opinion. It means you have grown past the need to fight every battle, because not every hill is worth dying on. Some arguments are just noise, distractions that pull you away from what actually matters. And in those moments, the strongest move is not to win. It is to let go. Imagine what your days would feel like if you didn't take the bait every time someone misunderstood you. If you could hear someone's view without needing to correct it. You would have more energy, more clarity, more time to focus on what fills you instead of what drains you. Letting go of the need to be right is like setting down a heavy weight you never realized you were carrying. It's not always easy, especially when you're passionate, when you know you are right. But that's when it matters most. That's when choosing grace over ego becomes a practice, a conscious decision to prioritize your peace over your pride. You do not have to prove anything. Your value doesn't increase when you win an argument, and it doesn't decrease when you walk away from one. There is a difference between standing for truth and chasing validation. The first is rooted in confidence, the second in insecurity. When you know who you are, you don't argue to be seen. You speak to be clear. And if that clarity is not received, you learn to move on. You don't cling. You don't spiral. You protect your energy and, in doing so, you build something far stronger than the illusion of control. You build inner peace. You realize that your opinion doesn't need an audience to be valid. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to be free. Free from overthinking, from over-explaining, from the emotional tug-of-war that keeps you tethered to others' approval. This is not about being passive. It is about being wise. About knowing when to engage and when to let it pass. Because the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one that's right. Sometimes, it's just the one that hasn't learned to listen yet. You can hold your values and express your thoughts with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And when someone tries to pull you into a power struggle, you simply don't go. Because you know what's at stake: your energy, your balance, your time. And those things are worth more than any temporary win. So let them think what they want. Let the conversation end without the last word. You lose nothing by walking away with your peace intact. In fact, you gain something far greater: freedom. And with that freedom comes the space to grow, to listen, to choose your battles wisely and your silence intentionally. Because when you stop needing to be right, you start being real. And being real, grounded, present, self-aware, that is where your power lives. 12. Comparing yourself to everyone online. It is terrifyingly easy to lose track of yourself when you are constantly scrolling through curated snapshots of other people's lives. You open your phone, and within seconds, you are flooded with images of perfect bodies, perfect homes, perfect relationships, perfect careers. Everyone seems to be moving faster, looking better, and doing more. It's a subtle shift at first, that tightening in your chest. You weren't feeling bad about yourself a moment ago, but now you're questioning everything: your pace, your progress, your worth. Not because anything in your life has changed, but because your mind has been hijacked by comparison. We live in an age where it is normal to scroll through hundreds of lives before breakfast, where success is measured in likes, beauty in filters, and happiness in posts. And even though we know, deep down, that it isn't real, that it's just the trailer, not the full movie, it still gets to us. Because the brain under pressure doesn't filter reality. It doesn't pause to say, "This is staged." It simply asks, "Why am I not there yet?" And just like that, your peace vanishes. You were proud of your progress until you saw someone else's highlight reel. You were content with your life until someone else's joy looked shinier. But here is the truth that cuts through all of that noise. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not in the wrong place. You are simply on a different path, one that is visible only to you. And because it is yours, no one else can validate it, and no one else can compare to it. The moment you see yourself through someone else's timeline, you lose the thread of your own story. And that is a story worth staying connected to. Because it is real, it is messy, it is honest, and it is yours. When you finally stop comparing and start accepting, something inside you shifts. You begin to own your pace. You start to trust that just because it hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean it never will. You understand that timing is not universal. It is personal. You realize that real transformation doesn't always look like a viral moment. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's slow. But it is always meaningful. Comparison steals more than your joy. It steals your identity. It makes you question your instincts and doubt your choices. Slowly, you start shifting your goals to match what you think will be most impressive, instead of what feels most aligned. But impressing people who don't know the full picture will never fulfill you. Even if you reach that milestone, it won't feel like yours. It will feel like you borrowed someone else's definition of success and wore it like a costume. The most profound transformations don't happen online. They happen in private, in the silence, in those in-between moments when no one is watching and you are simply doing the work, healing, learning, building, resting. That is where real change takes root. Not in likes or comments or public validation, but in the invisible layers of your growth that no algorithm will ever capture. And if you stay grounded in that, nothing anyone posts can shake you. Start muting what makes you feel small. You do not need to explain it. You owe no apology for protecting your mental space. If someone's content makes you feel like you are constantly coming up short, it is okay to step back. This isn't jealousy. It is self-awareness. It is saying, I need to hear my own voice louder than everyone else's right now. And that is not selfish. In a world that profits from your insecurity, it is survival. Your worth is not based on visibility. Some of the most meaningful parts of you can only be nurtured when you are not being watched, when you are offline, when you are not trying to prove anything. They grow best in stillness, away from comparison and performance. You have no idea what someone else had to sacrifice to get what they are showing you. You do not know their story, their struggle, their doubts. Social media doesn't show the breakdowns, the panic attacks, the lost friendships. It shows the highlight. And if you compare your behind the scenes to their edited preview, you will always feel like you are less. But you are not less. You are just seeing the tip of their iceberg and comparing it to the entirety of yours. So instead of scrolling to measure yourself, scroll to learn, to laugh, to connect. But do not scroll to assess your value, because nothing out there will ever tell you what your heart already knows, that you are on your own timeline, with your own rhythm and your own kind of magic. And when you honor that, you begin to move differently, more grounded, less reactive, less needy for external confirmation. What if you just trusted your process? What if you believed that your slower days are still sacred, that your small steps still matter, and that your story, with all its pauses and plot twists, is unfolding exactly as it should? The pressure to keep up only exists if you keep looking sideways. The moment you look inward, the race disappears. All that remains is your path. And that path is worth walking. Not to catch up, but because you finally realize you were never behind to begin with. 13. Overcommitment and people-pleasing. There is a version of you that learned to say yes before even thinking. Not because you always wanted to, but because somewhere along the line, you learned to believe that your value came from being needed. That if you could keep everyone happy, no one would leave. That if you just stayed available, agreeable, and accommodating, you would avoid conflict and rejection. So you kept saying yes. You took on one more task, one more favor, one more commitment, even as your body begged for rest, even as your mind was drowning in noise. And the scariest part? People got used to it. They stopped asking if you had time or energy. They just assumed you would be there, because you always were. But you are not a machine. You are not built to constantly give, to stretch, to absorb, without ever pausing to receive. You are human. You need stillness. You need boundaries. You need to hear your own voice again after weeks or months of trying to meet everyone else's expectations. The problem is, when your default setting is yes, saying no can feel like a betrayal. It feels like you are letting someone down, like you are failing. But it is not failure. It is freedom. It is the first sign that you are finally starting to respect yourself the way you have always respected others. Burnout is not a badge of honor. It is a warning sign. It is your system, flashing red, telling you that this pace is not sustainable. And still we push through, because we have romanticized overcommitment. We wear exhaustion like a trophy, as proof that we are hardworking, selfless, and loyal. But none of those qualities mean anything if you are crumbling on the inside. If your loyalty is costing you your health, your peace, and your sense of self, then it is not loyalty. It is self-abandonment. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." Perhaps that is where some of this people-pleasing began. You learned to be what others needed, to carry what others couldn't, to stay small so that others could feel big. But you are not that child anymore. It is no longer your job to keep everyone comfortable. Your job now is to take up space, to protect your time, to value your own needs even when no one else validates them. Saying no is not rude. It is clear. It is a complete sentence. You do not have to explain it. You do not need to soften it with a long apology. You do not owe anyone a spreadsheet of your energy levels. If it doesn't feel right, if it stretches you too thin, if it pulls you away from what matters, you are allowed to decline. And if you want to build a life that honors your truth instead of other people's demands, you are expected to. You are allowed to rest, not because you earned it through exhaustion, but because you are a living being who deserves recovery. You are allowed to leave texts on read, not because you're ignoring anyone, but because your nervous system isn't built for constant connection. You are allowed to prioritize silence, to cancel plans, to not be available all the time. That doesn't make you unreliable. It makes you real. And real people have limits. Overcommitting might make you feel useful, but eventually it makes you invisible, even to yourself. You begin to forget what you want, what lights you up, what actually matters to you. Your schedule becomes so full of everyone else's needs that you start reacting instead of choosing, drifting instead of directing. And slowly, your identity becomes a patchwork of other people's expectations. But you are not here to be everything to everyone. You are here to be deeply aligned with the few things that matter most. Peace isn't selfish. It's sacred. It is what allows you to show up with presence instead of resentment, with depth instead of depletion. When you say yes to everything, you dilute your power. You scatter your energy across a dozen things and show up halfway for all of them. But when you say no, even to good things, you create the space to say a powerful yes to what is truly meant for you. That's not selfish. That's wise. And it is hard, especially if you have been wired to seek approval through service. But every time you choose yourself, you rewire that story. You teach yourself that your needs matter, that your rest is valid, and that you do not have to break in order to be loved. Start small. One pause before every yes. One boundary where there used to be a blurred line. One moment of reflection before you commit out of habit. You won't unlearn people-pleasing in a day, but you can start by listening to that quiet inner voice that says, "I don't want to do this," and honoring it instead of overriding it. That voice is you, the real you, the one who's been waiting for you to come home. Let go of the version of you that believed being loved meant being useful. Let go of the story that your worth comes from being everything to everyone. It never did. You were always enough, even when you had nothing left to give. And now, it is time to give something back to yourself. Your time, your space, your voice. That isn't selfish. It's sacred. And it is long overdue. 14. The identity you outgrew. There is a quiet and unsettling discomfort that arrives when you start to feel like a stranger inside the very identity you've worn for years. Maybe you were the loud one, the funny one, the reliable one, the ambitious one. And for a time, that version of you worked. It served a purpose. It helped you connect, helped you cope, helped you feel safe in a world that demanded a clear label. But now something doesn't feel right. You are showing up in the same way, saying the same things, doing what you've always done. But it feels hollow. You can't quite explain it. You just know you've outgrown the role. The strange thing is, no one tells you that outgrowing a version of yourself can be more painful than leaving a person. Because that identity is not just a habit. It is how people know you. It's how you have been seen, praised, and accepted. So, when you begin to shed that skin, people notice. And not always with kindness. They might say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're not as fun, not as driven, not as available. And perhaps they are right, but not in the way they think. You are not abandoning who you were. You are stepping into who you are becoming. But there is grief in that shift. To release an old identity is to release the comfort it offered, even if that comfort was a subtle poison, even if it sapped your spirit. It was familiar. It was predictable. And there is a strange, steadying anchor in knowing exactly who the world expects you to be. But growth is a force that disdains comfort. It demands more of you. It demands that you abandon the well-trodden road and forge a new path into the wilderness with nothing but the will to begin. This is the source of its profound loneliness, for evolution often demands a season of isolation before it allows for reconnection. As Carl Jung once wrote, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." That unknown self, the one that feels foreign and strange, is often the next version of you trying to emerge. We resist it, not because we lack the desire to grow, but from a primal fear. The fear that if we change, we will no longer be loved. We have been taught to equate our identity with our worth. We believe that if we cease to be the achiever, we become invisible. If we abandon the role of the people-pleaser, we face exile. If we are no longer the fixer, we will be forgotten. But this is not truth. It is a ghost story told by fear. You owe the world no such rigid performance. You are not required to reprise a role simply because it once earned you applause. Your identity is not a binding contract. You are allowed to change, to soften, to slow down, to speak up. You are allowed to disappear for a while and return different. You are allowed to outgrow places, people, and entire ways of thinking, and you do not need a single soul's permission to do so. The greatest danger lies in a guilty loyalty to the person you once were. Just because that version of you ensured your survival does not mean it is the one who will teach you to thrive. You can honor it, thank it for carrying you this far, and still choose to walk on. Survival was never meant to be a permanent address. At some point, you must set down the armor and learn how to truly live, not merely endure. Sometimes this growth will be noticed by no one but you. There will be no applause, no recognition. It may look as simple as choosing not to react as you once did, saying no when the old you would have screamed yes, walking away instead of pleading your case. It will feel strange, this quiet refusal to perform, but in that silence, in that stillness, your next level is unfolding. And here is the truth few speak of. The people around you may not celebrate your growth because your transformation holds up a mirror to their own stagnation. When you deviate from the script, you force them to improvise, and not everyone is willing. Some will try to lure you back into the old, predictable role, not from malice, but because your change threatens their stability. They grew comfortable with the you they could predict, but your evolution was never meant to make others comfortable. It was meant to make you whole. You may lose relationships. It will hurt. But what you gain is immeasurably more valuable. Alignment, peace, integrity. The quiet, unshakable knowing that you are no longer pretending. You are living from a place of truth, even if that truth is still taking shape. We fear the new beginning. We mistake it for failure, when in truth it is the ultimate act of courage, the bravery to admit that a path has grown dark, that a life no longer feels like our own. We are sold a myth that progress is a straight, unwavering line. But sometimes the greatest act of progress is to turn around. We mourn the years spent in the wrong place, with the wrong person as the wrong self, believing it was all for nothing. But what if it wasn't? What if every misstep was simply preparing you to begin again with more wisdom, more consciousness, more of your true self? You are not returning to square one. You are returning to your center, armed with experience. The fear of starting over is really the fear of the unknown. The philosopher Seneca knew this well. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. It is the ending we resist, the letting go. To start over is to step into the unwritten, the unpredictable. It is to become a novice once more, and that vulnerability is terrifying. But it is also where freedom lives. When you no longer carry the weight of who you were, you are free to discover who you might become. If the life you are living is costing you your peace, it is too expensive. No amount of time invested can justify staying stuck when your soul is begging to move. You do not need a dramatic breakdown to justify a reset. You can simply decide, today, that the version of you who got here is not the one who will carry you forward. That is not a betrayal. It is evolution. And yes, the beginning will feel lonely. You may not have a map. You will stumble. You will doubt. But every person you admire began with a single decision. They refused to keep living the same day over and over. They chose the discomfort of a new beginning over the numbness of staying put. So, breathe. Let the old version of you rest. Let the roles you no longer relate to fade to black. Real growth rarely needs a speech. It simply needs space. And you, more than anyone, deserve to take up that space, fully, unapologetically, and without guilt. This is not an ending. It is an invitation to become everything you were once too afraid to be. You are not lost. You are simply, finally becoming.